Honour this morning to introduce our speaker, Dr. Durie. I first met Dr. Durie at the Takaro tennis courts in Palmerston North many moons ago. He was sitting on a park bench and he was kind of talking to himself, so I went over and sat by him. And he started telling me all these crazy things, like how he was going to build a tennis court with a roof over it because the wind was making him angry, and the rain in Palmerston North was always spoiling the tennis. He also went on to tell me how he's going to build a school one day. I thought he was some crazy man, so I immediately got up and walked away. 4 years later, I walked into an office after injuring my knee in a game of rugby, and it was the crazy man looking at me. He was the doctor. And I thought, man, you've come a long way in 4 years. I proceeded to ask him, I said, that tennis court you said you were going to build, did you build one? And he said, no, I built two and I put a roof over the top of it. Just recently, when I was out at his house, he said to me, see that tree there, I'm going to build a tree house one day. I said, you're crazy. I came back a couple of years later on and there's a 5-storey tree house with a toilet, a fireplace, bedrooms, living rooms. I say all of this to say this, that Dr. Durie he's influenced me tremendously. He's been a mentor of mine. When he says he's going to do something, he does it. And it's my pleasure now to introduce you to Dr. Durie.
That's a bit of an overstated sort of introduction. Let me start by saying that I'm always a bit nervous actually when I get introduced to a crowd as a doctor, because when I graduated from med school there were so few Māori doctors that no one actually believed I was a doctor. I remember getting invited to speak at the Queen Elizabeth College prize giving one year, and as I was being introduced I stood up to take off my jacket and one of the staff members said, oh, could you sit down please, Dr. Durie's about to talk. And I remember when I started work at Palmerston North Hospital as a house surgeon, I was doing a surgical run and we had a particularly sick patient on our ward, and at the end of the day I'd finished work, I'd gone off to rugby training, and on the way home I thought, shucks, I better just go and check on this patient because she's pretty sick. So I walked into the front door of the hospital and one of the security guards stopped me and he said, oh, where are you going? And I said, oh look, my name's Dr. Durie, I'm just going up to check on one of my patients. And the guy looked at me and he said, yeah Brian, I'm the Prime Minister now, visiting hours over, come back tomorrow. And there was another time when I was the doctor on call at one of the Sevens events in Fielding at Johnson Park. It was a regional seven-a-side tournament. And those of you who have played at Johnson Park know that the fields are on 2 levels. And halfway through the morning there's this message comes over the loudspeaker system, said, could the duty doctor please go to the bottom field, we have a player down. Could the duty doctor please go down to the doctor field, we have a player down on the bottom field, could they go there immediately? So I went running over and I stood at the top field and I looked down and I saw it was one of the Hurufenua players. And I thought, oh, choice, well, that team's mostly Māori, at least these guys will be running over, at least I'll believe I'm a doctor. So I went running over and I said, what's wrong? And Fabian Spencer, the captain of the Hurufenua team, he looks up and goes, it's all right, bro, the doctor's coming. So that's what I say, it's not easy being it's being Māori and being a doctor. Not many people believe you are a doctor. But actually, even our kids have got it hard these days. I was at a Christmas function some years ago, and we're at this Christmas function. Father Christmas is there, of course, and in walks this big, staunch Māori fella. And, you know, like black leather jacket on, full facial moko, dark glasses on, hair tied up in a top knot. And he was looking pretty intimidating. And this boy goes running up to Father Christmas, jumps on his lap, and Father Christmas goes, and what's your name, son? And this little boy goes, hee hee hee. And Father Christmas goes, oh, what's your name? And he goes, he. And Father Christmas looks up at the party, he says, oh, he's pretty shy, what's his name? And this big staunch Māori fellow, he's standing there and he goes, his name is Rangi Atua, mai te taumata, whakatangi tangi hana te koauro a tāne nui arangi. Smith. And I'm sort of thinking there, saying, shucks, no wonder this little fellow doesn't say his name, he probably can't remember it. And Father Christmas goes to him, he goes, he said, oh, and I don't think Father Christmas has done the cultural competency test, because he goes, okay, Rangi, what do you want for Christmas? And I'm sure this boy wanted to say, oh, I want a PlayStation and I want a bike and all the things that kids will, but before he can say anything, his father's sitting and he goes, you tell him we want our land back, boy. That's what I say, it's not hard, it's not easy being a Māori in this day and age. But one of the things I've learned during my life is that what you need to do is always take what you've got and use it to your advantage. And for me, being Māori is an important thing. When I got to medical school, I learned how to use my Māoriness as not a weapon, but as to my advantage. And I particularly remember we had this lecturer at Auckland Med School called Miss Glover. And she was an ophthalmologist, which is the other doctors who look after, your eyes and stuff. And she had the reputation at Auckland Med School of being the most intimidating, feared lecturer in the whole of med school history. And she was known for frequently reducing, adult students to tears. And in the ophthalmology department, they used to run things in small group tutorials. So one day we're over at the ophthalmology department and we're waiting. There's about 10 of us in one of these rooms waiting for a small group tutorial. And I didn't see her walk in, but you knew that she'd walked in because immediately she entered the room, there was just this deathly silence went over the whole room. And everybody just turned around and there she was. And everybody sort of starts shaking. And she walks up to the front of the room and she says, "Be seated, students." She commanded a huge respect just by her sheer presence. And we all sat down and felt like we were back in year one at school. And she goes, "Students, in these small group tutorials, I like to get to know my students better. So when I ask you your name, when I ask you to answer a question, I would like you to stand. I would like you to give me your full name." She said, "Before I ask you what the question is, I will repeat your full name back to you, and then you will answer the question." She said, "Is that understood, students?" And we went, "Yes, Miss Glover." And so she pointed to the student next to me, sitting next to me. And this boy stood up and you could see his knees shaking. And she goes, "What's your name?" And he goes, my name's Timothy Smith." And she looks at him. She goes, "Mr. Smith, do you not have a middle name?" He said, well, yes, it's Timothy Hanlon Smith." And she said, "Well, Timothy Hanlon Smith, when I ask you for your full name, you make sure you give me your full name. Is that understood?" He said, "Yes, Miss Glover." And then she stuck up this picture, stuck up a slide with what's called a retinogram, and she said, "Timothy Hanlon Smith, I want you to point out the 10 features on this retinogram that indicate this person's got diabetes mellitus." Now, this probably sounds like impossible. That was a hard question for all of us to answer. And I certainly didn't know any of the answers. Well, Timothy Smith was one of the brightest guys in our class. He only got two things right, and Miss Glover just tore shreds off and said, "Sit down." She said, "If that's the future if that's the standard of this year's medical students, then I fear for the visual safety of this country's nation." And then she pointed to the girl next to me and she said, "Stand." And this girl stood up and she said, "My name is Felicity Penelope Alexandria Fullerton Smith." And Miss Glover goes, "Okay, Felicity Penelope Alexandria Fullerton Smith, I want you to point out the 10 features on this retinogram that indicate this person's got hypertension." Well, poor Felicity couldn't get anything. And Miss Glover tore shreds off in her, and this poor girl sat down and she was absolutely distraught, sobbing, her medical career in tatters. And then she looked at me And without any hesitation, I stood straight up and I looked her straight in the eye and she said, "And what's your name, son?" And I said, "Miss Glover, my full name is Rauri Meihana Te Ramapakura Tiki Tiki a Tārama Te Rauparaha e tō mātou matu i te rangi tihei Māori ora Durie." And without taking her eyes off me, Miss Glover gave the faintest sign of a nod and she said, "Back on your feet, Timothy Hammond Smith." So that's what I mean, it's about using what you've got to the best of your advantage. I'll get into some serious stuff now. Look, let me just say, Nathan's invited me to talk today a little bit about sport and how I've used that to improve myself. And I know that Nathan's been keeping me informed of the developments here. And can I just say that turning up to watch you guys training this morning was absolutely inspiring. From little Chloe, Chloe Smith, winning her big test, and the girl from Switzerland winning hers, and Jordan Chambers, and then seeing you boys in the first 15. Mate, it's uplifting because that beep test is all about heart. And I'm pretty impressed with what's going on here. Nathan's aware that I started my own school some years ago, and that school had a big influence on sport, and in particular using sport to improve educational outcomes and make better people out of people. And where did that come from? Well, it came from a lot of things, but one of the reasons I went to mid school for, and let me start, and I'll tell you soon, that I didn't have a great desire growing up to be a doctor. I just sort of thought, well, I better go to university. I didn't really know what to do, and I didn't want to do anything else, so I did medicine. It was kind of a bit of a default selection. But when I went there, one of the goals I had was to improve the health of my people. When I grew up, things Māori were important. I'd grown up with my great-grandparents a lot. They'd done a lot of work for the Māori community, and so things like that were important to me. But if I got to med school and I had this sort of idealistic dream that I was going to help my people, that kind of got shattered actually when I left med school and started working in medicine, because what you quickly realise when you're a doctor anywhere in the world is that really your ability to change people's health and improve their health is pretty limited. The model that exists in this country and around the world is generally people only go to the doctor when they get sick or when they get injured. And all we really do as doctors is patch people up when they get injured or return their medical problem to a manageable level. We don't really improve their health. And so, I felt pretty restricted in what I could do. If we're only going to intervene at that level, we're going to miss a lot of, we're going to miss treating a lot of problems. It's been worked out that 60 to 80% of medical problems, including cancers, are preventable. So it makes sense to sort of prevent them from happening rather than just being the patch-up person at the end of the line. And that's how you really improve people's health. If you take a condition like diabetes mellitus, for example, type 2 diabetes is largely a preventable illness. And sadly, a lot of people, and when I say a lot, especially our Māori people, they don't present with this condition or they don't take it seriously until they've got like advanced kidney disease or they're going blind, because the diabetes affects their ability to see. And to my way of thinking, if you're going to wait to that time to intervene, you kind of miss the boat. We need to intervene earlier. And so how do we do that? Well, exercise, good eating, not smoking. They're all things we can do to prevent those things. And that's why with the work you guys are doing here with your sports academy, that's teaching people good lifestyle habits. That goes a long way to preventing those things. But what I also quickly realised when I started working in medicine is that if you really want to improve people's health, then there's little you can do as a doctor. What really determines if people are going to be healthy is if if you look at research or health statistics from this country and from anywhere in the world, what they consistently show is that people who are better educated, people who hold down better paying jobs, people whose lives have more meaning in them, that better predicts, as a group, that people enjoy far better health than people in less paid, well-paid jobs, people who are less educated. I mean, there's always exceptions to the rule. You can have somebody who's really wealthy and educated and unfit, but as a whole, that group of people enjoy far better health. So, improving educational outcomes, getting people into better paid jobs, giving people more meaning, and like that better predicts who's going to be healthy than any work we as doctors do. And that's why, in simple terms, what that means is that your teachers, this school, and the opportunities you take while you're here, that far better predicts whether you're going to be healthy later in life than coming to see me as a doctor. And that's some of the key thinking behind, well, that I had when I set up the school, about getting people better educated. How do we do that? Well, I don't have the answers for everyone, but what I knew for our own people, for a lot of Māori kids, is that sport and pride in things Māori are huge sources of motivation. Sport is something that countries, communities and organisations around the world have used to develop pride in themselves, make themselves feel better about themselves, and promote themselves. So sport plays an important role, not only in this community, but anywhere. And I'm pretty excited by what I see developing here at 102 College. Nathan's been keeping me informed. I look forward to watching you guys. How did my thinking for something like that come about? Well, let me tell you a little bit about my own upbringing. I mean, I'm no one special, that's for sure. I grew up in a shearing family. My dad was a shearer. My mum worked in the shearing gang. And I said, in our household, when I was growing up, we only talked about two things. We talked about rugby in winter, and we talked about shearing in summer. And that was my life. And you're influenced by what you've seen around you, so it's probably no surprise that my first preference was to be a gun shearer. That's what I had my heart set on. But you know, it was kind of confusing because my dad always used to say to us, and to use his words, he used to say, if you fellas end up working in the shearing shed, he says, I'm going to boot your ass all around the shearing shed. And that was kind of confusing to me because my dad had two brothers that had gone to university, and so I assumed that he would have had the same opportunity, and he chose to be a shearer. And I kept thinking to myself, well, if shearing's good enough for him, why shouldn't I be a shearer? And the other confusing thing for me, it was like a contradiction, was that whilst my dad said he wanted us to go to university, he used to put people in those positions down, and he used to glorify everything about shearers and shearing. So, for example, we had an All Black in our town called Kevin Everley. Well before most of the fellas' time, but he was a gun All Black. And I remember my dad taking us to watch him play one day, and I sat there as a young kid, and I watched this guy, and man, the money he had about him, this sort of physical presence he had on the field. He was a flanker. He was known as Hayburn because he used to make these devastating tackles. He was extremely physical. And I remember going home on the car afterwards, and I said to my dad, I said, Sharks, man, that fella's awesome, Dad. I see his hard tackles, and when I grow up, I want to be an All Black and I want to play like him. And my dad, without taking his eyes off the road, he just said, boy, can he shear 500 sheep in a day? And I thought, oh, shucks, shearers are more important than the All Blacks. And there was another time when we were driving through the middle of town in Durie, and I saw the father of one of my classmates at school walking to work. He had a suit and tie on and was carrying a briefcase. And I said to my dad, hey Dad, that's that girl Marianne Horsfield's father. She said, I think she said he's an accountant. What's that? He says, oh, he's they run business and look after people's money. And I said, man, he must be brainy, Dad. And my dad said to me, he says, boy, he says, the hardest thing those fellas do all day is the crossword. He says, put a handpiece in his hand and see what he's made out of. And so I sort of thought, oh, shucks, I thought accountants were important as well, but shearers are more important than them. So, you know, it's like as I say, you're influenced by what you see around you. And it's sort of been no surprise to my father that at the age of 14, I decided to leave school and be a shearer. I'd started working in the game when I was 11. By the time I was 14, I had a stand. I could shear 150 a day, which is not much, I guess, but for a 14-year-old, not too bad. What it meant was that I could earn more money in 1 week than my classmates were earning in a whole year doing a paper run. So it gave me sort of independence. So I thought, I'm ready to leave school, leave home. And I did. Me and my cousin, he was all of 18. We jumped in the car and we went down south, worked for a guy called George Porto, was a big shearing contractor down there. In the meantime, the school I'd been at, which was a school up north called St. Stephen's College, where there was an all Māori boarding school, they had run my parents and said, hey, is your boy not coming back to school? And we had a pretty loose upbringing where, you know, we used to stay with grandparents, used to stay with my uncles, and it was not uncommon for my parents not to know where I was. But they thought I was back at school. I was down in the South Island. So we got home, and I guess that they must have tracked me down through my auntie, and we finally got home, and I knew what was coming. So I had a meeting with my dad, and my dad just looked at me and he says, I thought I was going to get told off, but he said, so you want to be a shearer boy? And I said, yeah, as in you ain't going to change my mind either. And all he said to me was, good on you. And I thought, oh shucks, that kind of hit me by surprise. And 24 hours passed and I went back to my dad and I said, Dad, I thought you'd be a bit pissed off with me not wanting to go back to school. He said, no, if you want to be a shearer boy, go and be a shearer. He said, but you might as well forget about your rugby. And I said, what? He said, shearing wrecks your body, boy. If you want to be a rugby player, you'll never be an All Black if you're a shearer. Because he knew that I wanted to be an All Black more than I wanted to be a shearer. So that was the first time someone had used sport in my life to motivate me to do something I didn't really want to do. So within a split tenth of a second, I decided to go back to school. I got back to school. I wasn't particularly the most dedicated student. I was only at school to play rugby. The school I went to, St. Stephen's School, back in those days, it's closed down now, but back in those days it was probably the most powerful rugby school in the country. Before I got there, the first 15 hadn't lost a game in 5 years, and during my first 2 years they never lost a game either. So I was there predominantly to play rugby. I had the fortune to make the first 15 as a fifth former, which is like year 11 now, which is not uncommon these days, but back then at a powerful rugby school, that was a bit uncommon, and it gave me a lot of pride. I was the youngest in the team, and no sooner had I made the team than the English teacher at our school, Max Armstrong, he called a meeting with me and the first 15 coach, and at that meeting he said that he wanted the coach to pull me out of the first 15. And I said, what? And what he said was that I was struggling in my schoolwork. He said that as the youngest person in the first 15, the older boys would corrupt me. He said the first 15 requires a lot of time out of school. He said you need all the time, you need all the help that you can do to pass school certificate. That was the old exam we had nowadays. And I don't know whether he meant it, but what I interpreted his message to mean was that he didn't think I was intelligent enough to get school C unless I had all the support. And it kind of hurt me a bit. So the first 15 coach, he said, well, what do you think, right? What do you think about what Mr. Armstrong said? And I just said, oh, Andy, sir, I says, if you pull me out of this first 15, I says, I don't see the sense in being at the school because I'm only here to play rugby. And I says, but I'll make a promise. I says, if you let me stay on this team, I'll try hard in my schoolwork. And the first 15 coach said to me, he says, okay. He says, I'll make you a deal. He says, if your grades are good, we're going to check your grades every month, and if you're up to scratch, you can stay. If they're not, you're out of the team. So that year, I went from middle of the middle stream to topping the whole fifth form at my school. Not because I was particularly arrogant. I just wanted to be in the first team. That was the second time sport had been used to motivate me to do something I didn't particularly want to do. And I'm so glad it happened because having got school C, I then went on, got Durie, got bursary, got accepted into med school, and went and became a doctor. So that's why I think for a lot of our people, and a lot of you people, sport's such an important thing. So I really like what Nathan's doing here. I'm really keen to see how this year goes, and I watched all you kids train, or the guys in the Sports Academy train. Mate, it's just got so much potential, eh? Go out and wreck these teams. Kia ora.